Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episodes, and this episode is very important, and we are an AR enterprise. We have our famous speakers, very popular speakers, already many corporations and organizations, even the government body, they become big fan of World Talent Economy Forums, and all of them are actually our board of advisors, those who joined today, as well as our ambassadors. And Yes, next month we have our exclusive sessions in Dubai Expo. Most important thing is that as a keynote speakers in that session, the minister will join, and he actually give special thanks ministry from water purification departments to our World Talent Economy Forums speakers. And more than we also are organizing more sessions and more conference like Nikola Tesla conference and some other interesting things we are organizing. Hopefully it will be very much helpful for our audience. So I directly want to go to Professor Edward. I know you have a great think tank, and you are a very good thinker and analyst for VR and AR enterprise. So how you want to analyze these things? And most important thing is that we want to know more utilizations of AR and VR, especially in education and healthcare industry.
Well, thank you. And I love these sessions, and I wish I could be on more of them, but I'm pretty busy these days. Yes, here is the Oculus. This is the first version. There's another version out now. This is the one of the primo VR headsets. You can see how it goes over my head. And, and of course, initially these were developed for entertainment purposes. And in fact, my little daughters love to use their VR headsets not just for playing games, but for example, there's a 3D art program on this that you can get that one of my daughters loves to do, and she creates 3D art sculptures, and she can actually walk into the sculptures. But of course, what we're interested in is the various applications of this beyond entertainment, though entertainment, of course, is very important. First of all, the distinction between VR and augmented reality. VR is when you're in a completely artificial world. Augmented means that it's a mix. So, for example, one of the things we've talked about in the past is with augmented reality, you might be standing there and you're in your own room or you're in your own laboratory, but in front of you, you see some kind of a device that you're working on. You're trying to design, for example, and you can do that. You can intermix virtual with the real world. But to me, what's most exciting, and we get into this whenever we get into these conversations, is what entrepreneurs can do with this technology. In other words, we've discussed in the past and we'll continue to discuss what can be done in education. That to me is one of the most important areas where education is not just reading a book. Education is actually doing something. And so the more you can use, for example, virtual reality to play around with machines or play around with equations, or one of the things I find interesting, and I'm kind of thinking about how to do this, is one of my daughters struggles with math, the other not so much. But can you do things in 3D, in augmented reality or in virtual reality, where you actually see, well, this is how here's the equation on the page, but here's what really it means. So, I will give my daughters, for example, I'll say, well, we're doing a division problem. And so we have 93 and we want to divide it by 17. And I'll say, well, let's picture we have 93 cookies and we have 17 people sitting around the table. And I describe it like that, and they kind of conceptually understand it. But what if I could immediately show, here are the 93 cookies, here are the 17 people. And then I can say, well, we'd have to divide each cookie into 17ths or maybe 6ths or something like that. And then, boom, you actually see it. And so you're seeing the equation and you're seeing what the equation means in real time. That's just something I was thinking about last night that could be a use. So if somebody comes up with a virtual reality math program that could do that, you can see why just a very simple thing like that could really help in education. But of course, obviously, we're looking, when we're talking about more advanced education, you can see, sort of the iterative way you can use virtual reality or augmented reality to help students understand physics, to help them understand chemistry. I was watching a fascinating documentary last night on the CRISPR-Cas9 genetic editing tool, which you have to do a whole show on, by the way, because that's going to be one of the futures of healthcare. And the thing that was most impressive to me was how they were doing the graphics to explain what this very seemingly complicated, esoteric idea of genetic editing was. So I can picture a biology class where you don't just have a lecturer, but you're looking at the chromosomes, you're looking at the genetic material, you're going in and out and so forth. So the use in education, to me, is the most exciting thing, well, one of the two most exciting things about either virtual reality or augmented reality. The other, of course, is what you can do with in industry and manufacturing. And I always emphasize in these discussions the importance of entrepreneurs coming up with stuff that I can't imagine. There are people who are far smarter than me or far more innovative than me who will come up with something that I never even dreamed of. And then they'll give it a try. Maybe it'll fail, maybe it won't. But that's what the message I want to give to the folks in Malaysia and Bangladesh and the Philippines and India and all your listeners is think like an entrepreneur. Think of what you can do with these techno tools. And the augmented reality and the virtual reality are two of the most potentially powerful. They're already important, and they can be even more important in the future. So that's kind of my introductory thinking about this.
Thank you, thank you, Professor David Smith.
Well, and we did a great job setting up virtual and augmented reality and some of its usage. What's interesting to me right now is partially how fast the marketplace is exploding for those. Back in 2018, the global market was about 27 billion. And by 2025, it's expected to be a little bit over 400 billion. So that's a fairly healthy compound annual growth rate to get there. And it's one where I think we're going to see a lot of application. In the enterprise space, virtual reality and augmented reality often are referred to today as XR, as enterprise reality, and our extended reality. Both of those are very much what we're seeing apply in the enterprise space and in different flavors and different areas. Edward did a great job of talking about its use in education. And particularly in education, we're beginning to see the two combine to be immersive reality. So there's a lot of terms around the AR VR space that end up being, how do we apply this technologies? How do we apply the software, the hardware to make a difference in what we're doing? And if you begin to look at the whole marketplace of virtual reality, augmented reality, you'll see that the hardware makes up about half the market dollar size, and the other half of it is the software and the programming that go around it. So those are the two big elements that you have to begin to talk about as you begin to look at it. And the fact that augmented reality, virtual reality, interfaces with so many other different domains is real important here. Keys to using them is some of the EO technology, electrical optical technologies, using the cameras, using LiDAR, using sensors, using Internet of Things devices, using GPS as part of the system to enhance the end user's experience. As I look at it in industry, you kind of see a real interesting mix. If I look at it from industrial products, it's about 20%, automobiles, about 10%, aerospace and defense, about 7%, education, about 10%, Life science is rapidly growing its use in the enterprise. Right now, it's about 7%, but a really dramatically growing market in that space. So, really, when you look at it, it's growing its use and will be continuing to grow. What are some of the challenges? One of the biggest challenges today is that it's really hard to quantify what the return on investment is by using VR and augmented reality.
Mhm.
You have gut level feels that it increases productivity, it decreases errors and things like that, but there hasn't been really good uh, capabilities there to measure it. One of the other big challenges is experts to qualified people. This is a place where the education environment is lagging behind what is needed in the field. In fact, if you look at some of the industry statistics, over 60% of all AR VR projects are outsourced to third parties to deliver. So it's still very much in that stage and is being adapted. But some of the usage are great. I'm amazed there is a very large factory being built not far from my house here in Austin that is going to be developing batteries and electric vehicle trucks. And they are extensively using augmented reality there as part of building to let them build faster. They're using it as part of the permitting process where the city inspectors are actually doing part of the inspections by using augmented reality so that as they walk through, they can see where the pieces fit, where the equipment's going to fit. Uh, the people on that project have said the number of errors during the construction process has probably dropped by 75-80% just by the use of augmented reality. And the same thing as we look at healthcare, other applications like that. So this whole area of XAR, this enterprise augmented reality, artificial reality, are really growing and will have a major impact, I think, throughout the entire world.
Thank you, Mr. Adam. So you are also a transhumanist, and you have a lot of initiative, especially when we working as a team. I saw you are really contributing. My fact is that, like, what do you think, like, how actually VR and ER industry create more job opportunity for the youth community, because we are working for the youth development, and what kind of strategy we can take to creating more opportunity for this youth community.
Actually. I did have my friend come on the show, but I think he got a bit freaked out, so he's gone again.
Need a little volume there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm having problems with my microphone. Can you hear me a bit better?
Okay, please continue.
Yeah. So, can I come to back to that question a bit later, Sharif? I just want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay.
So this topic always reminds me of Plato's allegory of the cave, which illustrates how we interact with our world and environment in a world of shadows and simulacra of that which exists in higher dimensions that form the bigger picture. So I think our world of screens and information, superhighways and digital ethers make our world seem more like caves within caves within caves. It's caves all the way down. So this leads me into into some ethics and bioethics, like is this life a simulation? Philosophical questions. And whilst it is an interesting thought experiment to consider, I don't think it is a particularly pressing issue, and it doesn't really change anything. Because to me, if something is real enough to be real, then it's real. I know that sounds rather tautological, and admittedly it is. Um, this universe could be a hologram, it could be a simulation, it could be both, it could be mostly empty space, but whilst we still suffer, love, have friendships, families, doing good, fighting evil, and whether the universe is a hologram or not, or whether the universe is a simulation or not, does not have much significance in my opinion. This is our reality. So to us, it's real. Again, if it's real enough to be real, then it's real. So this takes us to like more obscure corners of ethics and bioethics, like do characters and avatars in games like The Sims suffer or not? Are they sentient or sapient or not? So I know I said earlier that the nature of our reality or realities don't matter in face of suffering in our world, but of course in situations and thought experiments where we try to calculate whether or not suffering or consciousness exist in cyberspace because we cannot yet be sure, then obviously that is important. Whereas in realities where suffering is a certainty, that takes priority before. And in video, like for example, video game bioethics, calculating if something in that world suffers or not is a priority so that we can do something about it, send rescue missions or make amendments to code and so on. So yeah, I'll come back to that question in a bit, Sharif, if that's all right. I'll just
Okay. Yes, Professor Edward, especially like we are concerned about economical sustainability, and definitely innovation is very important. That's why World Talent Economic Forum focus on cutting edge technologies. So what do you think? You are also running a think tank. How AR and VR enterprise can create more job opportunity or economical sustainability?
Well, you're absolutely right to bring up the question of economic sustainability, because I've been following technologies and the emergence of technologies for many, many years or even decades. And one of the problems we often see is someone will come up with a great idea, but we have unfortunately a really dearth of understanding about how economics works. This reminds me of back in the 1990s and a little bit after, there were a lot of discussions about putting orbiting solar panels in space. And the panels would basically collect sunlight. Of course, there's no atmosphere, so it would be, about as pure and, unfiltered as possible, and then beam it down to Earth in the form of microwaves or some other form of energy. So this is clean energy. You're not burning anything, etc. Sounds like a great idea, right? Except that if the cost of putting a pound of payload in space is $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000, it makes no economic sense. And I've seen the same sort of things for some of the so-called sustainable energy technologies. They simply don't scale. So what's important is to look at things like VR and augmented reality and see how you would integrate it in a cost-effective way into an enterprise. And as I say, that's why I always come back to the importance of an entrepreneur who has to figure these things out. One of the things that is important, and that I think in today's world, and I'm certain in the Asian Pacific area, which is such a dynamic economic cauldron, most people appreciate what happened with Moore's Law, which basically that's the law that Gordon Moore came up with in the 1960s, where he predicted that every year and a half to 2 years, essentially the computing power of would be doubled. And so the power didn't rise by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, like that. And those who understood that were able to say, well, we know what the cost is today, but we see where it's going to be in the future, so we can basically invest, we can look ahead. Think about augmented reality and virtual reality if you're an entrepreneur listening to this broadcast in that way. Take a look at the trends. Try to understand where it's going, what capacities are likely to come online 3 years, 5 years from now. And then as you think about a business plan, put that into it. So you'll be the entrepreneur who is ahead of everything and who has thought about this. The two obvious examples of what worked and what didn't work, people thinking like this, which is what I'm saying they should do when they think about using augmented reality for whether it's education, but especially in industry, is Kodak had the concept of digital photography first, but first it was so primitive they decided this isn't even worth worrying about. And what they didn't understand was Moore's Law it wasn't a good idea at that particular time when the innovation came out, but in 10 and 20 years it would be. And so Kodak, essentially, which used film, got run out of business because they didn't understand the trend with exponential technology. Similarly, Bill Gates did understand that as competition between producers of hardware continue because the software would become valuable. So he invested in the software, and then of course Microsoft Windows became the operating system for 95% of computers by the late 1990s. So if you're taking those two analogies, and if you are an innovator thinking about how can you use augmented reality and virtual reality in your business, you've got to think about it economically. You got to think about it economically in terms of don't overestimate, don't just you have to take cost into account because that is important, but look ahead, try to anticipate where the market is going, what you can do with this, what kind of combined services using augmented reality or virtual reality are going to emerge, and the cost will go down, and then create a business plan or business model based on those insights, because economics is so important, and you really have to understand cost. Otherwise, it's a great idea, but it makes no economic sense at all.
Thank you. Professor David Smith.
I love Edward throwing Moore's Law into this because it's so interesting. Moore's Law was made up actually of three parts. One of them was the whole area of the density of chips, and it's tracked so very well over years. Another one was the economics piece, and it actually has tracked really well too. And it, I think, as Edward is talking about the economics of AR, VR, Moore's first law and second law fit very well together with that. Moore's third law happened to be about the size of the die, and he blew that one so bad, people have forgotten he had three laws now, because the size of a chip today would be about 10 feet across going through a fab. And that's just not the case of what's done. But since Edwards brought Moore's Law into this, I think Moore's Law is very applicable. But I also think you need to look at Reed's Law and Metcalfe's Law as part of this. Metcalfe's Law really talks about how the markets increase and how the market reach is. And Bob Metcalfe was inventor of Ethernet, founder of 3Com and stuff. And the Metcalfe's law fits really well into the model of AR, VR in the enterprise, and how the number of people using it has to reach a critical mass for it to take off and for it to have the economic paybacks that both Edward and I have talked about as we go through this. So that's a very important part of it. Entrepreneurship is going to be big. Education, particularly in developing parts of the world, need to step up more to this area.
Thank you, Mr. Adam.
Thank you. To answer your earlier question, I think attracting young people into the world of VR and AR and digital education and the industry, I don't think it would be too much trouble to recruit young people into the virtual reality industries or the augmented reality industry, because I think we certainly already live in a society where some level of augmented reality is already being utilized across the board. And I think when people think of VR and AR, they automatically think of the usual tropes like visors and high-tech glasses. But it's already being used as a valuable resource on a more mundane level. We don't wait for the future or necessarily have to look forward to the future, because it's already here. We've just integrated it into our daily lives already. Only yesterday I used Google Maps in real time. Without it, I would be lost, and I would have gotten lost many times before. So having a smartphone is valuable for all of us in that way. And that's still augmented reality, which was a bit more outsourced version. So to try and answer your question about attracting youth and younger generations, I personally think it would be crucial to try and leave behind the more ruinous aspects of digital living behind, lest the effects of them carry on and be the downfall of young people for a while now already. So it is an inevitability that this technology will continue to be integrated, but what we need to do in tandem with training young people in AR and VR and e-education is to teach them about self-discipline. I love technology, the internet, emerging technology, but I've experienced firsthand some of the downsides of having technology in my life for pretty much the whole course of my life. So young people now, a lot of young people now are growing up with like iPads in their hands since like the ages of 2 and 3, and we really do have to be mindful about not to be alarmist or anything, but having neurological side effects of that. If we want these young people to be effective in these industries, I think teaching them kind of like self-discipline techniques is crucial, because um, I think the potential for addiction is rife, really. And in China they've got boot camps for young people quite severely affected by internet addiction, and I remember one horrible story about one young Chinese fellow, I think in a fit of frustration because of his internet addiction, he chopped his hand off. And so we need to. I mean, this is something they need to do. If you tell someone don't do this because of this, then like you say, you can't put an old head on young shoulders. So we do need to probably like be mindful of the neurological side effects, teach them about neurology, the brain, and studies where phenomena um, has been researched into the effects on the brain and the nervous system of screen consumption, and try and steer them in the right direction so they can be effective in these industries. Thank you, Srid.
Thank you, Mr. Dan, to joining to this session. We are discussing on VR and AR enterprise, and what your view, how actually VR and AR enterprise integrated with the business model, and how it will be helpful for the modern business.
Yeah, thanks for another good topic. As a local candidate for local office, and also pushing the U.S. Transhumanist Party platform, this is one place where transhumanist friendly people can really shine. The history of augmented reality is very long and rich. You might say the first person that represented a cave painting, of a person with a spear attacking, the wild ungulates on the plains of Africa. That was augmented reality there. I think it was William Gibson who said, cyberspace is where you are when you're on the telephone. So the first time we used telegraphs, or the first time we used any kind of augmentation to our senses, the telescope. Look at Galileo built a telescope that was 30 power zoom, scope, and he got burned at the stake for his trouble because he said, hey, the Earth goes around the sun, not the other way. And I think we're in a Galileo kind of moment right now. We have some people. There's really an augmented reality divide, which has to be addressed. And I think the people in the political space around the world are going to have to be the messengers and the heralds of closing that divide, of building the bridges that close that gap. We have we use apps here in governance in Thousand Oaks, California. There's an app that on Thousand Oaks TV they advertise called Connect TO. And it shows a woman running over a pothole, and then she gets out and she takes a picture of it with her smartphone, and she goes into the app and sends the information to City Hall. And then the commercial shows the pothole getting fixed, and she gets notified that it's fixed, and she's like, yay. I think, and David talking about the factory being built in Austin there for the mega factory. Sounds like it might be Elon Musk's enterprise, using that for permitting. I mean, I think these, as someone running on kind of a long arc platform for local city government, these are all ideas that I would want to maximize the use of AR, VR, mixed reality cyberspace reality in civic engagement. And I think we're just beginning to scratch the surface of that. I love the guest we had on an earlier show talking about virtualgaia.com, which is a mapping software, kind of like Google Earth, only this is a version of Google Earth that is not proprietary. Everything you do on Google Maps and Google Earth, for example, has to be Google owned and Google approved. But no worries, you can't own information. Information wants to be free, as I think Kevin Kelly, a cyberspace pioneer, said. And these things are getting fast, cheap, and out of control, much like autonomous life forms that have come to exist in cyberspace. I think we might even be on the verge of a new evolutionary name for ourselves. Instead of Homo sapiens sapiens, we might be Homo sapiens cyberdelic. The city that thinks about manifesting new kinds of mind control platforms, and I mean mind control in a good way, because actually the root of government, if you break it down, it's Latin for mind control. Ment is mind, govern is control. But if we do our mind control in a shared way, in a productive way, in an open source way, we're going to make the best of it. And it's an exciting journey. And I would just mention about species that are already kind of in augmented reality. The octopi is an amazing example in evolution. They have skin that's covered with what are called chromatophores, which are almost like LEDs. They can actually create cartoons and surface textures, and they communicate with other octopi in real time. It's almost like their minds are thinking inside out. And speaking of brains, they actually have 9 brains. They have a central brain, and they have a brain for each tentacle. And they don't live that long. They have about a 3-year lifespan. But they have another interesting function. They can modify their genetic material during their own lifetime, which is talk about a transhumanist kind of property. I mean, I think we could do a lot in VR and AR by kind of having an octopus's garden avatar. So we were actually talking about this on Clubhouse in a room dedicated to Terence McKenna, who was a big pioneer of altered states of awareness and consciousness and ethno-shamanism. And he's got such an archive of recordings. We were just in the Terence McKenna room on Clubhouse. We were saying, oh my gosh, we could have like this Terence McKenna land, and it would be in virtual reality, and it would have all these different aspects. So I think we've got a core group around that, developing that, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And that's my initial mind dump on this topic. I hope I approached your question.
Yes. Professor Edward, there is some technical question. Is IT technology, virtual reality, and augmented reality already implemented the Internet Information Service? Like anybody can get in or get access? Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, the answer is yes, and a couple of others have said. I mean, it's all around us now. We're involved in it right now. On the internet, on pretty much everywhere. It's all becoming more integrated. Now we still have, for example, right now we are doing this show on a platform where we're looking at 2-dimensional images of ourselves. You're in Malaysia. I'm in Maryland. Adam, where are you? In Britain somewhere, and so we're all over the place. Dan there is in San Francisco, or you're in California somewhere. No, you're in Thousand Oaks. Yeah. You're in Thousand Oaks. Yeah, David, you're over there in Texas. So we're all over the place. So we're doing this right now. I mean, but when we're talking about augmented reality and virtual reality, obviously, just in terms of something simple like this meeting, we would be sitting around a table, and I'd be looking at you like I'm in the Jedi, inner sanctum, where everyone's sitting around, and half of the Jedi Knights are who knows where, and we're seeing each other as holograms and avatars. So, I mean, that's going to be coming up probably in the next, it's probably going to be another decade, I suspect, before we get that sort of thing. So so we already have that. But, I'll make a couple of points. By the way, Dan, just for your information, the word governor comes from a Greek word. I forget exactly what it is, gouverneur. It's basically about rowing. And it was used for rowing boats, and it was like the rower, and so that's where our word governor comes from. Is where the Latins took it, and
Same
so
with cyber means helmsman, I think too. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's helmsman. Yeah, exactly. So just a little bit of interest there, but I'll make 2 points for your listeners. Point one is just to augment since we're talking about augmented reality, what Adam has talked about. We do have to have a balance between understanding the real world and understanding, the cyberspace, and making sure that we don't become what are called wireheads. Okay, which is where you're so into cyberspace and the fiction of, and you get, you sort of get to the point where you can't tell fiction from reality, because you can do all sorts of incredible things in cyberspace. And especially with augmented reality, you can fly, you can do all sorts of wonderful stuff. My kids play games in cyberspace, but I say, girls, remember, there's a real world here. There's really gravity, so you're going to fall down in the real world. You might not fall down in your in your game. So I do think and I'm a human. I consider myself a transhumanist, but I'm a humanist as well, and so it's important to remember human, human connections, human relations, family, things like that. Let's not take that out of the equation. So that's the first thing. The other thing, and again, this is speaking to your issue about entrepreneurs and businesses. I always recommend this book, 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel, who, of course, was co-founder of PayPal with Elon Musk. He's an entrepreneur. He's an investor, an angel investor in lots and lots and lots of companies. And I'm sure most of your listeners are familiar with Peter Thiel. And what's interesting about his little book here, it's a short book. You can get it on Amazon, or you can get a virtual copy of it, is that it really looks at some of the successes and some of the failures. And it looks at some of the pitfalls of entrepreneurs that have thought, oh, wow, we have this wonderful, for example, solar energy technology. Wow, I'm going to go into that area too and make $1 zillion. And then he says, here's why it didn't work. Not that the technology itself, isn't something that should be developed, but he kind of looks at the wrong way of thinking about businesses and the right way. And so what I would urge your listeners who are interested in how can you take augmented reality and virtual reality and use it in an enterprise is to frame your thinking with these sorts of issues about management and about setting up businesses, and about thinking of what value are you creating, who are your competitors, what are the alternative uses for your capital and for your talent. Talent, by the way, is very important, which is why this is called World Talent Economic Forum. So it's important to look at that as well. But again, I want to emphasize the importance of entrepreneurs looking at all of these things and having a mind frame where, yes, you want to do incredible, great things, but you've got to recognize that the path is going to be complicated. So please take that into account as you take virtual reality and try to figure out what to do with it.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, I think you want to add some point for this question. And beside that, I have another thing. So will virtual reality transfer as a successful training tools for audit practice at university? Yes.
To answer your question, yes, and I'll go more into it. But actually, I love part of what Edward talked about again. I mean, it's great following Ed. He helped set me up so well. He mentioned about your program, Sharif, and how we could do it in a virtual environment or as holograms. We actually could implement that today and could implement it very easily. And at ETT, actually, one of our portfolio companies based in Sweden has begun to develop and deploy a virtual classroom environment where students walk into the classroom. If the teacher says, Edward, why don't you and Dan and David go work in a group project? It has breakout rooms in virtual reality where we can go and work together and like that. So that technology is beginning to be used today in a very interesting way. Holograms are the next part, but particularly the whole area of augmented reality has great use in education. And as you begin to look at how it's going to be used in education, there is some really great ways to look at it. And part of it actually will go back to what Dan said earlier. There's another term of human sapien, metaverse. And metaverse is really the creating of the synthetic environment. And AR, VR, part of the goal of both of them is to create these synthetic environments. And particularly if, going back to your question, Sharif, in higher education, well, actually in education as a whole, if I can create this synthetic environment, if I can, in biology, do dissections without actually having a dead animal in front of me, and do that in virtual reality, I think that's a win. If I'm in medical school and I'm beginning to learn different parts of the body, the whole virtual reality is a great way to begin to do it. The other area in here is you're going to see onboarding become very much of a virtual reality point in companies, onboarding in education, the ability for me to connect both to more senses. Part of virtual reality, part of the immersive part of it is going to be as we connect more senses into this environment. When we can put the sense that we can feel a wind blowing across our face, when we can connect the sense of smell, when we can put the other things in that immersive environment, that is where you will see tremendous gains in applying this. And one where the entrepreneurs have a real advantage today because they can begin to take the pieces without the overhead of older frameworks, without the overhead of legacy software, and begin to build it there. And if I were in a university today interested in this area, I would go and take both the physics. I would take actually some media classes. I would take physics, engineering to begin to pull this. The whole area of visualization and virtualization are at the intersection of successfully building and applying enterprise VR, AR. So really a lot of great opportunities.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Dan.
Yeah, that we were talking about not falling into the wirehead problem, and I think that recent movie Ready Player One had a very hopeful message where it said, like, the Oasis is closed on was it Tuesdays? It was like, so it's like we need to, as we become denizens or netizens of cyberspace, we need to respect and leave room for original space or nature space. Hopefully the two will arise in a complementary, or they will complement each other. I mean, that's problematic because the there we go. There's the
Yes.
the deluxe edition. Yeah, great movie, by the way. I think one of the problems of human civilization is we let our knowledge outstrip our wisdom. When that becomes when the knowledge gets ahead of the wisdom, look out. Things go sideways real fast. So hopefully we can use these tools in a way that increases our wisdom and that checks our dangerous aspects of our knowledge. That's an open question. I think we all need to become highly more civically engaged. There's just a very startling lack of people, taking responsibility for their future through governance mechanisms. That's what I'd like to actually be the most big part of my stress test of the political system, much as Tom Ross is going to be stress testing with his virtual running mate or his AI running mate. I don't want to speak for him, but I think that's the future of governance is digital twinning, simulation, and yes, as the question was just posed, can AR and VR work together? I think that's an amazing frontier, because right now our sensory spectra is very limited from what's actually we know scientifically we can see is present in the universe. I mean, imagine if you could suddenly see the whole electromagnetic spectrum as variations of sensory data. It might just overwhelm you. I mean, but to be able to fine tune, selectively use different paintbrushes. Someone once said that the spacecraft that we're sending to other planets, that's just an extension of our eyes and hands. This is just like an artist using a more nuanced paintbrush, and we are the curious, creative species. And what a time to be alive. I'll throw it back to the panel there. Thanks. I hope I answered some of the.
Thank you. Mr. Adam, I think there is a question from audience. Onika Shams, can VR AR work together? So I think already our speaker analyzed, but if you response to her questions, yeah.
Well, I think, I mean, I think augmented reality is like virtual reality, and the real world and how the sensory modalities interacting with the real waking world has come together. So I think it's more of a question of AR is, like, in my opinion, the way I see it, is VR, and overlaid with the ways that we interact with the real world. So, I mean, I think AR would be more useful for us than VR, because as was mentioned a couple of times earlier, VR is it's more of its own immersive thing, really, and I think there's more of a risk to get cut off from the real world a bit more than AR, because, well, ideally AR is these kind of modalities in VR overlaid in our interactions with real life. So yeah, I think so yeah. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Professor Edward, actually, like, if you want to respond, like, give some sort of example from different industry, healthcare industry or education industries and construction industries information for our audience, because Monica, I think she is new for this kind of technology. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yep, I'm on. Yeah, I mean, again, David gave some good examples early on of, for example, in construction and in designing buildings. You can, first of all, show what the building's going to be like. You can be standing there, construction site, and it's just starting to go up, and you can use augmented reality to say, this is how it's supposed to look. And then you can actually use augmented reality to say, you know what, it looks like this thing is not exactly correct. We better, with an inspection or whatever, you want to make sure that you can guarantee the safety of the building. So you can use augmented reality, for example, to do that. You can use virtual reality to design the actual building, or augmented reality. You can be sitting there in a virtual thing, and you can be putting together the units and the pieces, and that this piece allows for a certain amount of stress. And if it gets too much stress and you're kind of putting the little virtual pieces together and then suddenly this thing collapses, well, because we have the virtual reality program to know what the stress of this particular thing is, okay, well, we know we can't do that. So you can see how we're kind of going between the two worlds of virtual reality, maybe where you're designing the building in a complete virtual space, versus actually building the building where you're using augmented reality. By the way, I'd like to go back to the question that Sharif you raised earlier about thinking about this in terms of businesses and entrepreneurs. And I've mentioned the Peter Thiel book, which I think should help frame some of your entrepreneurial thinking about what to do with it. And I'll mention another book here. It's by someone who I've worked with in the past, Value Creation Principles by Bart Madden. And I'll mention that particular book as well, because it talks about something very, very important. And that is, if you are looking at virtual reality, augmented reality, and how to work it into your business, you have to think in terms of economics, and ultimately that means value creation. And what exactly are you creating that there's a market for, as opposed to, oh, this is really cool technical stuff, but no one's going to pay for it. I'm going to lose money. And I mentioned this book because it gives, since you asked for examples about augmented reality, this gives a ton of examples about, here's businesses that have failed. Here's why, for example, Amazon was not returning profits in the short term, but people continued to invest in Amazon because they saw where the trajectory of Amazon was. So you're going to get a lot of great examples in this particular book. And so again, if you're an entrepreneur thinking about virtual reality and augmented reality and putting your business together, you need to frame your thinking as a business person, an entrepreneur, with books like the two I just mentioned, and that will help. And that's going to help you a whole lot, so that you actually come up with a business that makes profits and that benefits other people, because customers are ultimately looking for value. They want to pay for stuff that they're going to get something from. Educators, governments that are looking for something so they can make sure about safety, business people, construction people, engine designers, spaceship designers, all of these folks are looking for value, right? So that's how you ultimately have to think about these things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor David Smith.
The ability to do an intelligent overlay, the ability to do an intelligent background versus what you're doing in real time, is fundamentally changing the way we can interact with our surroundings. If I'm trying to work on my car, and if I can go ahead and use an augmented reality that shows me, no, it's the third one over and not the second one, while I'm actually in there doing it, will save me a lot of time, make me more productive, and save me money in the long run. You're seeing it used in manufacturing, particularly when manufacturing change lot runs of what they're doing and changes processes and flows. You're seeing it begin to use in places where there's high risk. One of the very interesting uses of augmented reality is in the offshore oil industry. So if I have a place where the control room is filled with smoke, I can wear an augmented reality headset, if it's been set up before, and be able to walk into that smoke-filled room and find that valve to turn it off, to find other things like that. So you're seeing applications just really exploding in where this can be used. There's challenges with getting there. The headsets are interesting challenges that you have to work with, but some of the biggest challenges as you look at this is to produce these environments require a fair amount of computational power, because what you need to do is reduce the lead lag time between what is being rendered, what is being done, and how you can begin to access it and use it. Another one is battery life. Uh, Today, many of the headsets can barely last a whole work shift. And, 8 hours, 9 hours of battery life in a headset, delivering extremely high quality graphics with all that computational power, is hard to do. The field of view is another challenge. My human view can extend to approximately 180 degrees. many of the virtual reality, augmented reality headsets just do not give us that field of view. So that type of environment is still constraining some of what we're doing. Most of the virtual reality headsets want you to use voice commands. Increasingly, we need to see more gesturing come into virtual reality. Eye tracking is going to really help reducing your power requirements as you begin to apply this in the industrial complex. I love Edward bringing up the original Oculus One. If you've used those, it's heavy. It's going to be hard to wear that the entire day to do things with it. So you've got to reduce weight, but yet get more power to it and things. You need to make it extend further in your vision, but not be so heavy and confining.
Right.
The Microsoft Halo lenses were an attempt to begin to do that, which I think have some really good benefits going forward. But it has to come back. So there's a lot of time in there that will make it work even better.
Yeah, David, by the way, David, I'll just add that one of my daughters who likes to do the 3D sculptures, I was saying, well, why don't you do more of this often? You like to do it on paper. And she says, well, the thing gets heavy on my head and I have to take it off. Yeah.
And when I've used this there, the other thing that is going to be really necessary, Sharif, to get this to be widespread use in the enterprise is the sensors outside the headset. I cannot tell you how many times I've hit somebody next to me or I've bumped into a piece of furniture because you don't see that in your virtual environment. And so we've got to equip the virtual reality headsets with sensors to protect the user and those around us. There's a story of at one of the universities where it was being applied in training. And in this one class, they had 3 different students fall down stairs in the classroom because it just wasn't protected that way. Now they have a gate across the stairs in that classroom, but still, that's just a great example of how you get wrapped up into your virtual environment because your artificial augmented reality becomes your real environment as you get into it, independent of the physical environment around you. So those are some of the challenges going there. Those are some of the things. But as you can see, if I can get so immersed in my virtual reality, the applications in business, the application in healthcare, the application in training, the application in first responders is just tremendous. And is one that can help us, particularly where in many instances qualified personnel might be constrained, and to be able to go and apply that in the future. Last thing on this one, to give you an example of how it's being employed. I'm going to be at a meeting this afternoon at the International Accelerator here in Austin, where this group from Uzbekistan is coming to visit with us there. One of the companies coming there is in AR. Another one is in training where they're using VR as part of their training. So just as an example, a meeting today from Uzbekistan, 2 of the companies visiting are applying it in what they want to try to do and ship it to the rest of the world from there. So great examples that can apply within your region too, Sharif.
Thank you. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks, and the audience, those who are observing our show, please share our content as much as possible with your government, with your think tanks, with your corporations and academy. Thank you for all of your support, our Professor Edward, Professor David Smith, Mr. Dan, and Mr. Adam. Mr. Dan, what's your concluding remarks today?
Well, it's like we've just invented, the telegraph or the telephone, and we're just figuring out what can be done with it. I mean, I don't think they knew everything that was going to be done. I was just thinking about the whole field of emergency response. I encourage people to get the CERT training, which is free online. It's a community emergency response team, because let's face it, the government infrastructure cannot fully respond in the case of mass catastrophic outcomes. We're going to have to learn to take care of each other, and we're going to need to know who's, there's a whole system of disaster, communication. When you've searched a house, you spray paint an X, and you put the house has been searched. Here's the number of people. Here's the hazards that are present. and you move on. It's same with triaging during mass casualty events. There's a triage tag. You have like 30 seconds to diagnose a patient and tag them either dead. You tag, black tag, green tag, red tag, yellow tag. You do all these specialized procedures, and you move on. The whole thing is, there's time is a critical thing, and I think what we haven't really looked at is managing the dimension of time in XR, which XR is kind of the catch-all for extended reality. It includes augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality. But I think if you could visualize what has to be done in what sequence, there's a talk of people are doing permaculture design at the watershed level, and one thing they'll do is make a map of the whole drainage basin, and they'll animate the water flows. You can actually do what's called a hydrological strobing. You can see when it rains, okay, here's the water, and you're animating the flows across the landscape. And then if you have that kind of larger picture, you could see where your little property fits in this watershed level permaculture design, and you could design accordingly. You'd know where to put the swales and the berms and the water flow features. Another example in construction, I used to work at a place that installed central vacuum systems, where you would have a vacuum cleaner in the garage, a canister vac, and there would be pipes going to all the bedrooms. So you just plug in your vacuum in that plug in a hose in the wall, and you do your vacuuming, and everything gets sucked through the walls. Now, the guy that was running this was just a 3D modeling genius. He must have been doing VR in his head, because he could see, where to put the pipes, where they're not going to interfere with the plumbing, with the electrical, with the fire suppression sprinkler system. And the point was, you had to get there before the drywallers covered up the frame house, but you had to get there after everyone else had already installed their infrastructure. So it was a real time pressure thing. We'd say, okay, the drywallers are coming. In 5 hours, we've got to drill all these holes and run all these 1.5 inch pipes through the frame. And like Edward was saying, you have to not take out a critical structural member while you're doing this. So I just think it would have been great if we'd had a system that could do that visualization of not just the infrastructure components, the different layers, but also the time pressure. If you could animate the impending time dimension of the reality. So I know that was a little bit digressive, but I think it's going to be another frontier, is adding the time component and animating the time component. We never would have got to the moon if NASA hadn't invented a whole new project management system called critical path analysis, where you had to have all the steps, not only million steps, but all in the right order. They all had to be done in the right order, in the right time window. And there were 1 million steps. And, I think applying project management thinking, time-based thinking to XR is going to be amazing. So you all have your instructions. Get on it.
Yes, thank you, Professor Edward.
Well, we had a wonderful discussion, as we always do on your shows, Sharif, about the technology and what can be done with it, and some of the things we have to be careful about as becoming wireheads. And so I'll just end with my usual point about the importance of entrepreneurs figuring out what to do with this, how to create value, how to do it in a profitable manner, so you're not investing $1 billion in order to make $1 million, which makes no sense at all. So I'd say, again, frame your thinking. If you're an entrepreneur in the Asia Pacific area, frame your thinking with understanding how, what businesses have worked, what businesses haven't worked, what lessons there are. This is a discussion of Amazon in this book about value creation. Think like an entrepreneur, understand the pitfalls, understand the strategies you might apply. So when you take virtual reality technology and augmented reality technology, you can integrate it most effectively with all of the other technologies that we discuss in these wonderful broadcasts.
Thank you. Mr. Adam.
Thank you, Sharif. My mind went a bit blank earlier. So what Professor David Smith was saying inspired me and made me think of our discussions about pollution, and we can use augmented reality using software program to identify harmful toxins in the water, in the air. I think on a sensory level, it's an out of sight, out of mind situation. I mean, you can see chimneys and factories coughing out all those plumes of smoke and smog. But on a daily basis, a lot of harmful contaminants are invisible. You can see an oil spill on the surface of an ocean after a tanker has capsized. But on a more subtle basis, we should use AR to highlight contaminants using computer graphics, obviously, on the smaller orders of magnitude we interact with in our daily lives. And AR, like David Smith said again, will solve a lot of accidents. I have bumped into things a few times when staring at my phone. We see others doing the same thing. There are videos on YouTube of people falling into water features in malls. And just in Nottingham 3 years ago, a man got hit by a bus because he was listening to music and staring at his phone when trying to cross the road. And you still see flowers on the nearby lamppost to this day. And one of the biggest risks is having your phone stolen, of course. I don't want to be lost somewhere staring into Google Maps. I'm following the directions and then someone swoops in to snatch my phone away right out of my hand. So a smartwatch or a smart contact lens, a pair of smart contact lenses projecting AR graphic overlays would be a lot more tricky to mug someone for. I loved Mr. Dan's explanation of proto-AR when he first came on. It reminded me of other interesting illustrations within the transhumanist movement, where they explain, usually to Luddites, that we are already cyborgs ever since we first started wearing glasses. And then fewer numbers will say even wearing makeup and earrings is a kind of proto-cyborgification, which I don't think convinces the Luddites, but I know I certainly love these illustrations. I think I read that even using flint tools was transhumanism. That might be overkill, but I can still see where they're coming from. And he reminded me of something else when he talked about mind-controlled tech, the sci-fi film Forbidden Planet from 1956, where the backstory of the alien Krell species and their extinction was explained as how they destroyed themselves because they built a machine that could materialize anything, anywhere that they could imagine, just using the power of thought. And monsters from the id, from deep in their subconscious, materialized, a problem they failed to consider, and they destroyed themselves. So that is kind of the other direction. It's going the other way from what I was talking about before, about how tech will affect our minds. So cautionary tales like Forbidden Planet warn us about how our minds will affect the tech, or what the tech creates, which we could argue is a long way off yet, unless you take into consideration some of the more disturbing horror stories involving the dark web. Then the darkness of the human mind and soul is much closer, so close that I think it is a moral emergency to clamp down on criminal black markets like trafficking. So this loops me back to what I touched upon a little bit earlier. As a budding ethicist, I am concerned about teaching new generations discipline and awareness to be effective users of VR and AR with enough discipline to protect themselves from going down slippery slopes you can't climb back out of. I was pleased to hear Mr. Edward Hudgens and Mr. Dan mention the word wirehead, which is a common word used in transhumanism and sci-fi novels. Again, this highlights the dangers of addiction. Again, I think, is it an addiction that is as bad as drug addiction? I don't think that is a helpful question. They're so qualitatively different, then comparison is almost pointless, I think, because addictions to internet pornography, gory imagery even, are ruinous in their own way, that the treatments and therapeutics used to treat drug addicts or alcoholics might be ineffective. Hence why we need to educate people on the neurology of all this. And finally, I was thinking about the question you asked me about youth communities and young people. And it reminded me of a story I like to think about, and I mentioned it before, about when Google Glass first came out. It was being lapped up by trendy technophiles, and people wearing them in the street were being met with hostile reactions. And outright aggression. They were being attacked in fast food joints because they alarmed ordinary people who were concerned about their privacy. And then, of course, short time after that, everyone's got a smartphone, and whenever there's an incident in the street, they're all filming it. So how did that take off? But Google Glass didn't. Why did young people invest more of their money in things like smartphones, but Google Glass failed? So I suppose that goes back to all the things like Betamax and VHS. There's probably lots of different things involved. So yeah, that's all I've got to say. Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, Professor David Smith.
Well, I need to go get my VHS tapes out though. But no, to me, if I look at the enterprise space with VR and AR, one of the things we talk about in some others is the concept of the digital twin. If I combine digital twins with VR and AR in an enterprise environment, I have widespread impact across my enterprise. I can model using VR and see interactions without having to actually buy the equipment, buy the stock, and do it by modeling. Really great productivity enhancement there. The two of these can help organizations, not just manufacturing organization, but business process organization, education, universities, reduce the operational cost. You can begin to use it in there. It will increase employment engagement. It will actually increase employment retention. The manufacturing going down the street, in the construction industry, you have pretty high turnover. This project has not had that turnover because of the use of augmented reality and with the people seeing how it's making them better craftsmen. And as I've said before, it lets me mirror and model the real world while being safe. Now, I do wish I could take augmented reality and extend it with teleportation. I have to be in meetings tomorrow to negotiate a company we're going to buy. Final negotiation, hopefully. But I would love to do it without driving the 4 hours in each direction to get there and have that meeting. And do it in a holographic, augmented reality, and only teleport there if we need to be there. That is where I'm waiting to see this technology go to and begin to do that. But the future in this, particularly in the Asian Pacific area, with the ability to get to low-cost electronics there, is one where I think there's just tremendous opportunities and a really bright future for entrepreneurship to happen in that area, and for governments to begin to use this to streamline the way they govern with their processes and procedures with the citizens of the country. So Sharif, thank you yet again. Great show.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for joining today's sessions, and thanks for all of your support for World Talent Economy Forums. Actually, I want to give thanks to our board of advisors, our members, and all of our those who support World Talent Economy Forum, because we are moving forward. And beside that, we are just thinking as a think tank, as well as we are trying to develop a modern platform. And definitely it will be knowledge-based media. And already not only Malaysia, even different countries, they believe that World Talent Economy Forum actually contributing for the nations. It's not personal interest. It's not a corporate interest. Malaysian government, they believe that World Talent Economy Forums actually moving with the national interest. So that's why they select World Talent Economy Forums, and Ministry of Water and Environment, he give special thanks. And today they are actually sharing their concept and everything with World Talent Economy Forum. So those who join in our session, I'm sure perhaps it will be one of the largest public-private partnership, open dialogue, and business collaborations in Asia Pacific. And World Talent Economy Forum actually trying to develop a blueprint. And the Deputy Secretary General, Minister of Environment and Water, Dr. Ching To Kim will join in this forum as a keynote speakers. And World Talent Economy Forum helping Malaysian government to developing $60 billion ecosystem for next 5 years. And definitely we need corporations, we need scientists, we need intellectual communities, we need governments, we need investors to develop a better ecosystem. Not only Malaysian government, beside that, country like India, Bangladesh, even some other countries, they are always communicating with World Talent Economy Forum. So I believe all of your support, especially every day, the speakers, our board of advisors, our like innovators, our fellow, those who supporting World Talent Economy Forum, you will be part of history. You will be part of human civilization developments. Many things we need to finish, and I can assure World Talent Economy Forum will be a best platform from Asia Pacific. And already we are getting a very good support from the government. And I think your discussions, your dialogue, and your thought will be helpful for human development. Thank you, Professor Edward, Mr. Adam, Mr. Professor David Smith, Mr. Dan. I think this is the starting. We have to finish many jobs. We have to do many work. It's not only open dialogue. We are just starting. I can assure that at least 10 different Prime Minister office we are working. So we need to rebuild this new world with the help of politicians, corporations, and academia. Thank you for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. See you next week. Bye-bye and take care.
Bye.